So I'm going to go ahead and start off with a question that came up while you were presenting, Dr. Topper. In regards to the research on student persistence to completion in an online setting, you had kind of mentioned what you do as far as reaching out to students before the drop deadline, emailing, that kind of thing. And I was just wondering if there was anything done institutionally, because you have whole courses that are offered through online. So do you do anything institutionally to address this issue, and how successful have those actions proven?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess one of the things we did for our program when we made it completely online was we instituted a student assessment of competency using technology. It's called Tools, Test of Online Learning Success. And so before students take any classes in our online program, they have to complete this tools survey. And the survey basically determines competency using Blackboard and persisting in an online course and following up and asking questions and using email. And so what we do is we identify students through this instrument who might lack some competencies or some skills or some affective elements. And we reach out to them and we invite them to consider whether this format is appropriate for their needs. I don't assume that all students can be successful in a completely online program. Likewise, my guess is that not all students can be successful in a completely online class. So I think one of the obligations faculty have is to make sure that students understand that this may be too hard for them. This may be too difficult for them for whatever reason. I think there is a misconception about an online class being less time or easier than a face-to-face class. My experience is the opposite. It's probably more time. It's spread out more over a longer period, but it's probably more time. But as with any other thing, the more you put into an online class, likely the more you're going to get out. And I think that's another thing we need to make sure. In terms of institutional, I've seen some of the data from Grand Valley. We need to improve as an institution. One of the things that we have done, which I think is really helpful, is we have an optional online hybrid student tutorial orientation, which basically walks students through what to expect in an online course. This is something that I was on the committee that helped develop this. We wanted to make this required for a student who enrolled in an online or hybrid course, but our administrators thought that was a bad idea. So it's up to the faculty to use it or not. I use it in every one of my classes. And as a result of completing this, students can generate a certificate of completion. They can send that to me, and then I know at least they've had some basic training, some basic thinking about the differences between an online and a face-to-face class.
So for your classes personally, is that used as a prereq then?
Right. The first thing I do in the first week of my class is if a student has not had an online or a hybrid class in the past, I ask them to complete the online orientation and send me their certificate. And then I am sure they are comfortable moving forward in the class.
Thank you. Tracy asks, of all the activities you've taught online, what is your favorite one based on what students ended up creating?
This is really a tough question. I think one of the things I will talk about as a story is when I first started teaching, we went to a hybrid format because our students are teachers primarily and they wanted their nights and weekends. So anyway, one of the things I was concerned about is whether or not I would have a sense of my students' engagement in their learning. And so I remembered a student who had been in my class who had very little to say week after week, hardly seemed to participate at all. And I was worried. At the end of the session, one of the things I do is I ask students to share something they created that's relevant to them professionally, but also addresses kind of what the course is focused about. So so this student presented, and I was totally blown away by how much they did. They were thoughtful, creative, expressive. And I thought to myself, this is a person I did not know had been doing all this work because I wasn't seeing it. You know, that's the thing, is we tend to see it in a face-to-face setting. We see the recognition, we hear people talking about it. Sometimes in the online format, we can have people who maybe are shy, a little more reserved, but that doesn't mean they're not getting what they need out of the course. And I think that end of term experience is something I really enjoy.
Ellie posted, what are some challenges that you have dealt with as far as student struggles in their online courses?
Well, I talked about the misconception that an online course or a hybrid course is less time. I think students often assume that. I don't know why. Um, One of the things I do is I ask my students to share their experience in online or hybrid format, because what I learned was they will listen to each other, but they won't listen to me. I can tell them the very same thing, they won't hear it. So what I do is I ask students who have been in other classes to talk about them from a critical standpoint. You know, what were the things that didn't work? You know, what kinds of things should new students or students who are new to my approach, what should they know to be successful? And I think, again, that gets back to this issue of developing a sense of connectedness where people have shared experiences, and that's used as a knowledge base for hopefully improving student success. Angie, I can see your mouth moving, but I can't.
Okay, that button on my headset, I tell you. So I was just wondering if anyone wanted to pick Dr. Topper's brain on any student struggles that they have encountered in the online setting. Some of you just being thrown into it. Some of you I know teach in there quite frequently. I'm looking at Monica Fries is in with us. So if anyone has particular struggles that they want to maybe find some solutions for.
One of the things I will say that I worry about, some students disappear from my class for long periods of time where, you know, they'll start out really well and then they'll drop off. And I'm sure Canvas has this capability, but Blackboard has the ability to track when students use. Can go back and see how often and how long each student has been in Blackboard on my course. And so every couple of weeks, I will run that report and I'll identify students who have done much or haven't done anything over the last couple of weeks. And to me, that's a red flag. Sometimes there are personal things that come up that are legitimate in terms of why they haven't been participating. But I think that's another difference between an online or a hybrid course and a face-to-face. You know, face-to-face, people show up and that's it. They're in an online course, they can disappear. And if we're not paying attention, if we're not watching, weeks can go by and then they're really in trouble.
So do you find that that's a role that you take on? How frequently do you check that data in your system?
Um, I am fairly careful about students. Again, if I have had a student before, I kind of trust that they know what's expected. When I'm teaching a class that has a lot of new students I haven't had before, again, some of the expectations may be different from previous experiences with other faculty members. So if that's the case, I typically will run those reports for the first weeks of the term, and then perhaps about halfway through. And then if I find someone who is not participating, email them immediately and I say, you probably should drop this class because you're not participating at the required levels. I also update student participation 3 times during the term, about a third of the way through, about halfway through and about 2/3 of the way through. So that way students know where they stand in terms of their participation.
So Kelly kind of posted to everyone just to make sure if you're looking at the chat or not. Has anyone used the ability to track or see when a student was last on in Canvas?
I use it all the time. I check in, just like my face-to-face class. If they've missed 2 sessions in a row, I send an email notice, hey, I'm missing you. Same thing. If a week's gone by and they haven't entered their Canvas shell, I try to let them know, like you said, just, hey, I want to know what's going on. You don't have to tell me details, but are you okay? Are you wanting to finish this class? If not, you need to see an advisor to take care of whatever the issue is. I over the years I've just found out there's so many things that has nothing to do with academics that hold up our students. And I mean, with both of my kids just finishing college, I just things I would never do as a student, they do all the time, and it drives me nuts. And I've realized they have a whole different perspective of life and how they interact with their instructors. And so I just don't take it personally anymore. I just reach out as much as I can, and most of them respond. Very few disappear completely. Um, and then I'll tell them, and I have told them even now, I'll give them more weeks to work on stuff if they have had technology issues, or if they are in situations where they're taking care of kids and things like that, that they need more time. I'll give them an incomplete for this semester, and they have a few more weeks here till the beginning of school to get stuff caught up. um, it's hard. I think everybody's just, especially if you're online like we have been the last 3 days, it's just mentally draining. And it seems like most of the students I've heard from that are struggling in various classes, it's because packets were just thrown up there and they're having to read through them and dissect all the information and self-teach, and they are just shut down on all their classes because of that happening. And so I think it's just tough the last 8 weeks for everybody, just adjusting to this new normal.
Right, and picking up on that, I'll tell another story. I was in my chat session last night with my students, and students are assigned a week to facilitate. I think I mentioned that earlier. So one of my students says, I'm due the week you have me scheduled to facilitate. Is there any way I can change that? She said, I'm probably going to be busy doing other stuff. I said, absolutely. That can easily be done. Certainly you've got more important things to do than worry about facilitating discussion in my class. So those are the kinds of things that, you think about them and they're fairly straightforward. But a lot of times if students don't feel comfortable asking that question, that puts them in a very difficult spot. Like I say, I think we need to welcome students asking questions like that. Can I get an extension on this assignment? I've had a personal issue, or, I spent a weekend in the hospital, or I was in an accident. Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's one of the benefits of this online format, is we can be a little more flexible about when things get done.
So the flexibility to me brings up an interesting issue. When I moved from K-12 to the university setting, I noticed that instructors are not as flexible as K-12 instructors, and it just seemed really harsh to me. And so Monica really brought up the whole empathy for the situation that we're in, and I was kind of wondering, as we move forward, how you see that empathy versus responsibility, and how you see different instructors navigating that. And that's really, for the whole crowd that's here, just an interesting topic to me.
Yeah, no, it's always amazing to me, some of the assumptions we make as we get older. And we kind of see ourselves in our little cubicle, our role. And I think it's easy to become less flexible, to begin to want things a certain way, to expect students to be a certain kind of person, There was conversation earlier about the changing nature of college students. Students going to college now are not like what they were 20 years ago. Students are living socially through technology. Students are asking for more flexibility. Students are asking for options, for consideration to special circumstance. And I think that's a positive change for education. I think it's probably taking longer at our level, higher education, than it is at K-12. I think K-12 teachers are much closer to their students and care more about them in that sense. I think there is a danger of having a class of 50 or 100 students in higher ed where you don't really know any of those students or their particular circumstance. So I think one of the things I'm hoping is, as we move more towards this idea of a flexible format, that we begin to more seriously take into consideration the needs of our students. What do they need? What are they dealing with? What kinds of things do they need accommodations for? And those could be simple, easy things, providing transcripts for audios, or they could be, giving a student more opportunity to work on an assignment because of a life event. To me, those are things that make sense if we're going to continue to be successful in higher education.
To reiterate on that, I also talk to my students in my online classes and face-to-face. Is like, if I don't ever hear from you, then I don't know that there's an issue. And you really have to just keep in touch with me. It doesn't mean you have to give me details. You don't have to, tell me things, but it's hard for me to write a letter of reference, or it's hard for me to give you an extension if I have never heard from you or talked to you or communicated with you beforehand. So you do need to be engaged, just like an employer. You have to let them know that you're going to be out, or you have a family issue that's arisen or whatever. I just try to communicate with them from the very beginning. I'm a human being, you're a human being. Things happen in our lives, but we have to work through that. But you can't expect me to let you finish up 8 weeks of class if you never responded to any of my emails or my video post or anything for the last 8 weeks. You can't now say, okay, I want to finish this class. Okay, where have you been? You've never, provided anything to me. So you have to give me a little bit. You have to, work with me here. You can't just expect those things. And I think as you teach, you start realizing what's a kind of that false narrative that's just that crutch, and the ones that really are needing that. And I always give them the benefit of the doubt, even those that I know are just lying to me. I try to rephrase how to do things and give them, okay, you missed this, but now you're going to have to do an additional assignment because I can't give you the same pay for the week if you didn't show up for 20 of the hours. You don't expect to have the same paycheck at McDonald's as your coworkers that worked 40 hours. So, I have to give them some responsibility, but also give them a flexibility. So that's something that I think we have to really realize. Sometimes they don't realize that they're using those crutches, or they're using those situations to become a victim, and we have to empower them to realize they can control some of these things. They just maybe don't know the techniques of it right now. So next assignment, we're going to make sure we're ahead of time, and we're going to prepare a little bit better for our whatever it is in our class.
Just to piggyback on that, I think some of us have different expectations for our students. Certainly having students who are memorize and recall and share, basic information about a topic, whatever it is, that's the expectation that comes with certain responsibility. Asking our students to be critical, objective, to be asking questions about evidence, and to be more of an adult professional in terms of their own approach to learning. I think that is part of the challenge that you're describing. Again, some of our students are used to being spoon-fed and simple answer. I think when we challenge them, sometimes we make them uncomfortable. So I agree. I think students coming to us now from so many different places, we can't make the same assumptions about who they are anymore.
We still have about 7 minutes left in the question and answer session. So if anyone has any other topics that they want to bring up or questions.
A question from Callie about alternative kinds of assignments, correct? Okay, so yes, I'm not a big believer in writing long, arduous papers as a culminating experience. I think that has limited value. Certainly, like I say, I treat my students as adult professionals, most of them are. So, so my expectation is things. One, you're going to take what you already know, and you're going to find a way to add to it what I'm helping you understand and learn. But you judge, you decide how best to apply it and in what context. So if it makes more sense for you to develop a proposal within your professional setting that accomplish both goals, my goal of getting you to demonstrate that you learned, but your goal of making some substantive change within your organization, to me, that makes complete sense, because that's an actual real world example that I don't have to fabricate out of cloth. That's something that you bring to the table. You have these problems, and so why not use the course as an opportunity to advocate for change? I mean, to me, those are things that are much more beneficial than simply writing a 30-page paper on an article about, I don't know, technology and education.
Does anyone want to brainstorm ideas for assessment activities for your own content, your own subject area? If not, I think we can have a break before the 11:30. Go ahead, Angie, do your wrap up.
Well, the wrap up is that at 11:30, we are taking a break for lunch, and we will have a discussion that will be hosted by Dee Dee Stakely from Ferris, and she is on right now. So this discussion is going to be a little bit more of a loose session than what we've had in other lunch discussions. And then we will come back at 1 for our third presentation.
So grab your food and come on back if you will, because this is a chance people can talk to the other people who are participating. Thank you so much, Dr. Topper. That was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome, and you participated, and best of luck.
Thank you.